So today I have on the bench a Toshiba RT6075 boombox from 1985. This was my grandfather's, and he was a carpenter and would take this with him on the job site. So my mom ended up giving it to me, not thinking it was worth too much, but with the whole cassette revival back in full effect, obviously there's a cassette deck here, I figured I'd crack it open and see if I could fix it. Honestly, I don't know if it doesn't work, but being from 1985, I can only imagine that the belts, I'm sure, are shot and need to be replaced, and who knows what else. I have not opened this up, I haven't even plugged it in. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to try and fix this Toshiba RT6075 boombox. Now I noticed right away when I was handling this boombox that it was heavy, and here's the reason why. There were still 6 D-cell batteries in here, and as you can see, these look terrible. And I was very worried at first, before I really started getting into this, that this had kind of corroded really badly to the point where it was unrepairable. But that ended up not being the case. I did get lucky. This is pretty much the worst of it, as you'll see here. But let me take these out and clean it, and I'll show you how bad it is. And clearly you can see I'm prying it out. And the reason for that is I guess they kind of corroded together. And also they were bulging a little bit. So I even kind of had to pull a little harder to get some of these out. This was the worst of it, as you'll see. It's mostly just dust, but I did have the gloves on just to be safe. But yeah, these batteries don't even have any kind of date stamp. I mean, I'm sure I could probably look up the packaging and see what that era it was from, but I'm guessing from the mid-90s. But yeah, these were definitely way past their prime. So now that I've got the battery compartment all cleaned out, I was going to skip over this part, but I'm going to keep it in because I like to kind of pay it forward for anybody who works on things like this. So this particular boombox, all the screws are actually on the front, and you see me here trying to put a screwdriver in the back thinking that they're here. That's not what's in there. And if I really kind of look down there with using the studio lights, I could kind of see that there is no screw there. So don't do this. All the screws are on the front. So knowing that, I'm going to flip this over, and I'm going to show you where there are 5 screws to take out to get into this thing. There are 2 at the top. You'll see me doing one of them there. Of course, symmetrically, it's on the other side of that little speaker. And there are 2 where the feet are, which are going to be obvious. But the 5th one is not as obvious, and let me show you where that is. So the 5th screw is located on the inside of the tape mechanism. You have to hit eject, and I'll kind of position it here so you can see it. But you can get a screwdriver in there. It's at the top. But that's it. That's the 5th one. And it's good to know that, because if you didn't know it, you'd probably be trying to pry this thing apart not knowing that it's in there. But that is the 5th one. All right, so now that I've got that screw out, this is another tricky part. And I noticed that it's kind of hinged down here with these latches. So I couldn't just pull it apart very easily. So after much kind of trial and error, I also didn't want to snap these either, because I know, it's 30-some years old and brittle. So I realized that if I put the screwdriver in through the battery compartment, I kind of press down on them enough from that angle so they kind of unsnap from here. And here's how you do that. And I'm applying just enough pressure to get it over the latch to not break it. So I only have to remove one more thing, and that's the radio knob on the front to get this cover off. And everything else there, those other buttons are all from the inside, as you'll see. Just lifts off now, and now we have the cover off. And just taking a look here, for being from 1985, other than that battery corrosion, it's not too bad. I mean, it's a little dusty, as you would expect, but I'm not seeing any tears in the speaker. The buttons are going up and down. I'm not seeing anything broken or out of place. I'm kind of just looking for anything that is either out of place or maybe a bulging cap or something that, or a wire that's loose or missing. But so far, in this general first examination, it looks pretty clean. So similarly, how I had started out trying to unscrew this whole thing from the back and finding that the screws were all in the front, I was also surprised to find out there are only 3 screws that hold this entire thing inside here. The speaker that I just lifted out, you can see it just kind of rests in that thing. The same, of course, for the other speaker. So let me start taking this apart, and I will show you the full, removal sequence that I used to get everything out of here. So I started by removing the speakers because they were the closest to the top. And clearly, as you can see, as I remove that little, I guess it's a piezo speaker, it just kind of sits there. And there's little kind of areas that the wires can latch into as well. And it all just kind of pulls out real nicely. Again, I thought it would have been more secured in there by screws or whatever, but yeah, it just kind of wrapped around stuff and kind of in there. So yeah, just started pulling things out to get the speakers out first. And then I noticed that this was one of the battery connections, and it was pretty corroded. So in this case, instead of trying to pull it out, I ended up just breaking it because I knew the corrosion was pretty bad. So I figured I could just strip the wire and either connect it again or solder it on, which you'll see how I do that later. And obviously, I didn't do that to begin with. I thought I would be maybe clever and pull this top mechanism out and see if I could slide out the red and the black wires with it. And I ended up not being able to do that, as I saw and found out, and you can see here, there's a lot more connected to it. But first, I removed the connection for the tape deck, or these two here. So those just kind of unplug from here. And I did that first. Now, I typically don't like using pliers on something so delicate, but I had struggled for about 5-10 minutes just to try to get those two out, and ended up having to use some force at the top of the pliers. It was the only way they would come out, but it was, to me, prying it was better than prying it out. Now here you're going to see me turn my attention back to the red and the black wires for the battery connection, and in this case, again, the black wire was so corroded, it really just pulled right off at this point because I had moved it so much and it came out there, you could see. But the red wire, again, kind of in those little slots there, and the wire comes all the way over, that kind of pulled out. It actually pulled out a little easier now that I had some more stuff out of there, as you could just see. So that's how I removed this entire mechanism and the black and the red wires for the battery. Of course, that was not before I realized that it would be a lot easier for me to get the last portion of the red wire out from underneath the tape mechanism by removing the tape mechanism first. So that's why I put that off to the side, and I'm going to remove the tape mechanism with these two screws that I pointed out earlier. And of course, with the tape mechanism removed, we can now see the belt, and there are no surprises here. It's not even connected, or it's snapped. And you'll see later when I start to clean this thing just how bad this belt is. So right now I'm going to hit up eBay and order a belt for this so we can continue with the repair. As you can see, this belt costs $11.25, and that's with shipping. So I figured, I got the boombox for free, and all it needs is a little bit of repair. So $11.25 to repair this, not bad. So while I'm waiting for this to arrive in the mail, I just turned my attention to doing what I could, and at this point it's just cleaning the front and back of the boombox itself, and it actually cleaned up really nicely. You'll see here when I'm all kind of finished, of course. But for being from 1985 and being at the job site with a carpenter, this was in way better condition than I thought it was. It really was just dirty. I mean, it's not even really scratched up or anything. So for being from 1985, I gotta say, I'm surprised. So while that's drying, I'm going to turn my attention to the guts of this thing, which is, of course, the circuit board. And I'm going to try and clean if there's anything that needs cleaning, or if anything's missing. I'm going to look at the caps, see if there's anything out of place. And I'll set the tape mechanism aside, and we'll do that last. Here I'm just going to use some canned air and blow out any dirt and dust that might have accumulated over the years. And it's actually, again, not too bad, but I'm getting a little bit out of there. But overall, it's pretty good, pretty clean. And I'm going to also do the same thing for the speakers. Same thing here. Blew a little more dust out of these, but again, pretty clean. And I don't see any tears in the speaker cones or anything. So, so far, so good. Next, I'm going to add some deoxit spray into the switches and pots here. And one of them is a volume pot. One of them is a left and right speaker. The other one is a tone. And the two toggle switches are tape, AM, and then FM for the radio. And then the other side is like a stereo, mono, and stereo wide. So I'm just going to spray some deoxit into these, assuming that they need it. I think I'm pretty confident in my assumption that these will need it after so many years. And of course, after I'm finished spraying, I'm just going to move the toggles up and down and move the pots left and right to get the spray into all the places that it needs to be. So now I'm going to turn my attention to the tape mechanism itself, and the first thing here I'm doing is just blowing some air, getting any of the dust and debris that may have accumulated over the years out before I start cleaning and doing the belts. I'm also going to take some isopropyl alcohol here in a Q-tip and run it over anything that would have had fingerprints or dirt that may have been a little more lodged in there. I don't think my grandfather really used the tape mechanism as much on this. I think he probably just brought it along to have a radio. So this thing's looking pretty clean. I'm cleaning off all the pinch rollers and the head here, and it's very clean. I don't know how much it got used, so I may be lucky on this. So now it's time to remove the old belt, and I got to tell you, I have replaced belts in a few tape mechanisms in my time, and this was by far the worst, most messiest. This belt was just complete mush, and it gets worse from here. I should have wore gloves. I didn't, so if you guys are doing this, you're going to want to wear some rubber gloves. So this was the oldest tape mechanism that I've ever replaced a belt on. Again, 1985, so I'm not surprised at the condition of the belt, but it's so hard to get this out, and you'll see here in a moment that I have to really get in there with Q-tips and isopropyl alcohol and really just try to get that belt out of these grooves. Here you see I have the tweezer inside the groove of one of these wheels, and it's kind of accumulating on there, but it's so mushy and so slow, and I had to make several passes to even get anywhere close to being able to get before I could get a Q-tip in there. And here I'll show you just how much it almost looks like ink when you see me lift this paper towel up. It absorbs right in, and it's so sticky and gooey. But hey, it is what it is, and that's what it takes to get these things cleaned. So now I'm going to start with the isopropyl alcohol to clean out as best I can anywhere that these belts were. And you just have to do your best to get that in that groove and make several turns and twists of the wheel, and it's going to come out here. You're going to see how it's still just coming out, whatever I couldn't reach with the tweezer from before. I made several passes of this on all the wheels. I used several Q-tips, and it does eventually clean. It ends up getting real nice, but just know that if you're doing this, it's going to take you a while. And don't forget to clean all three wheels, including the motor that you see I'm doing right there. That was actually kind of the hardest one to get in because it's got that little shroud around it, and it's the smallest wheel as well. But either way, you definitely have to get that in there because that's really the driver of the whole thing. So here's what it looked like after I was all finished. That was my last swipe through with the isopropyl alcohol, and it cleaned it up pretty nicely. And for that matter, I may as well show you the aftermath here. This is what my hands look like. This is what the paper towel looked like. Obviously, it looks like ink, like I mentioned, but yeah, this was the worst belt I've ever had to replace. So, of course, now it's time to replace the old belt with the new one. And a quick note about this one. I know some people have a collection of belts that they buy online, and sometimes they see if they can get them to fit. I don't know if that matters. I don't know what the exact diameter of this is, but I do know that it is a square belt. So if you had a bunch of round ones, and I don't know if it would or wouldn't work with the round one, but just know that this one is square. Another thing worth mentioning is the fact that I had done a couple different ways to try to get this around the wheels, and I found out that putting it on the motor back there first and then bringing it around through this big wheel here ended up being the best way to get this on. And you can see it goes on pretty easily. So yeah, start at the motor in the back and then bring it around. And here's a close-up of what the final routing looks like for this belt. All right, so it's time for reassembly, and I didn't want to be that guy who says, oh, just do everything you just did, but in reverse. So I am going to show you how I put this back together and the sequence I used to do it. So I started with the circuit board at the top, and that's going to go in here, and it does have some little area to line it up with, and really what I was lining it up with was the left and right microphone inputs from the back at these little holes, and that's actually what I used to line it up. Next, I have to screw in this metal retainer, and that's how this upper mechanism gets held in place. Earlier in the video, I mentioned that I forgot to record me unplugging the antenna, and it's pretty obvious where it goes. There's a little metal rod that kind of sticks out here. So that just goes back in there. Next, I replaced the red battery wire for the right side, and it kind of snakes along the bottom, goes in those little connection areas, as you'll see. But this part was actually pretty easy. Now, all that went pretty well until I realized when I got to the other side that I have to add the black battery wire. And that's where I had to get a little more creative because I had to reattach it to the metal spring. And you'll see here what I have to do. So to make this connection easier, I put a pliers on that spring and just pulled it out of the little slot that it went into. So after figuring out which would be the best way to do this, I ended up stripping the wire a little bit to expose new fresh wire. I ended up wrapping it around the spring, and then of course, as you can see here, soldered it on. Now that the wire is reconnected to that spring, I'm just putting the spring back into the battery compartment where it belongs. And, I'm probably really not going to use this with battery. I'm probably always going to plug it in. But I didn't just want to leave it. It makes more sense. I like to do these things as complete as possible just because, that's the best way to do a restoration, in my opinion. Up next is the right speaker, and you'll see that it's pretty easy to spot because it has the longest cords to get to the other side. And just runs along the bottom, goes in those grooves. And a reminder that the speakers don't get screwed in, they just fit into these cavities that are set up there for them. And just remember that the wires do get put back into those little grooves. So just make sure that you put everything in there so it snugs up. So now, of course, it's time for the tape mechanism to go back in. And I found it's actually easier to reattach it to the circuit board before you screw it in because you can kind of hold it out of the way, as you can see there, so I can get my hand in there. But I did find that was the easier way to do it. Attach it first, then put it where it goes, and then screw it in. And we're almost done. Just need to put this top cover back on. And don't forget those latch hinges at the bottom. I put those on first and then kind of laid it down over top the buttons so the buttons and the toggle switches went through. And then I just returned the screws, of course, where they go. There are 2 shorter screws. Those go where these feet are. And the other 3 screws that are taller go at the top where the speakers are that you see. And finally, the 3rd screw will go in where the tape deck mechanism is. So here's the moment of truth. Let's see if it works and how it sounds. So far so good. I've got sound coming out of it and the radio seems to work, but I want to check out the tape deck. So let's play some Vaporwave for nostalgic reasons and to try to avoid a copyright strike. So it looks like the tone knob works all right. The balance knob is a little off, and the volumes seem to be mostly okay. Now let's see if it'll reverse directions. All right, great success. All right, so let's do a little before and after. Here's what it looked like when I first got it, and here's what it looks like now. This thing cleaned up very nicely. Anyway, I hope this video was helpful to you if you have any projects like this. And if you like what you saw, please consider liking and subscribing. On the way out, we're going to listen to some Vaporwave Whitesnake.